Hello friends, this is Durga again from IT University. I'm a stop shop to learn all the technologies. At this time, we are talking about the online as well as classroom live big data workshop. And as you guys know, this is the backup for existing uh, for, for the live audience. So let me set up the WebEx for the live audience, then we'll get started. So those who are online, please confirm that you can see my screen and also you can listen to me from WebEx. Can you guys see my screen? Okay. So let's get started. So far we have covered Spark using Scala as programming language. Then we got into Spark streaming along with Flume and Kafka. And then we have seen Hive quite extensively in last 4 sessions. In today's session as well as the next 2 sessions, we will be primarily talking about Sqoop. Okay, first we'll start with the architecture of the Sqoop, and then we'll get into the syntax and semantics while doing the demos. So to get the architecture of the Sqoop, you can log into the Ambari using this URL. Those who have the lab access, you can actually go to the Ambari URL, get your credentials, and from the labs.itversity.com, then click on sign in. And if you look at list of the services, Sqoop is one of the service. And if you select Sqoop, you will see the summary. If you look at the summary, if you compare HDFS and Sqoop, even at this page without navigating further, you can see Sqoop have a grade icon beside it, and it is saying client-only service, which means that there are no daemon or background process which will be running to support Sqoop. Like HDFS or Hive, if you look at HDFS, you have daemon process called name nodes, secondary name node, data nodes. So this green, yellow, as well as red color will is applied only for those technologies which have some background process, which have state to support that tool. Similarly, if you go to Hive, Hive just to connect to the Hive Metastore and also to facilitate your applications to connect to Hive using third-party ODBC jars and all, we have this Hive Server 2 web service, etc. As they have the state, that's why you can see the green icon as everything is clean with them. When it comes to Sqoop, you have the grade icon. And also if you hover onto that, you will see client only. So Sqoop is just client only, which means that you just have to deploy the binaries and set the Hadoop home path. And based on that, it will understand where your Hadoop is. So any technology with respect to big data, primarily you should think about what is the underlying file system to store the data and how the data will be processed. Okay, when it comes to for all the wrapper tools like Sqoop, HBase, Hive, Pig, for all these things, you should think about file system and processing. So with respect to Sqoop, the file system is HDFS. And when it comes to processing the data, typically for most of the Sqoop commands, it has to connect to a relational database. And you use Sqoop to get data from relational database into HDFS, which will store the data permanently within our big data cluster, or vice versa, which means you read data from HDFS and copy data to relational database. Okay, for processing perspective, it uses MapReduce, but when it do the MapReduce, in case of Hive, typically the source as well as target is HDFS. If you use insert query or select query, etc. Especially with insert. When it comes to Sqoop, typically the source will be relational database and the target will be HDFS. Okay, and processing, for the processing purpose, it uses MapReduce. That being said, if you log into the lab, And there is no command line interface such as Hive, where you will get into Hive command line interface, which will accept all the valid Hive commands. Sqoop command line interface is just one command called Sqoop and bunch of sub commands under it. Okay, so if you just if the Sqoop installed, if you type Sqoop and hit enter, it will show the usage of the Sqoop. No, you have to actually use Sqoop help to see the usage. If the Sqoop is installed, you will see this message when you run Sqoop. And if you do Sqoop help, it will get you the list of high-level commands. Again, within this high-level commands, there will be many control arguments which you need to understand so that you can actually run Sqoop commands. It is similar to, if you are familiar with Oracle export import, it is similar to that. The only difference is export import is primarily used to get data from database into the file system, and then that is called as export, and import is from the file system into database. Okay, whereas here, if it is Sqoop import, then you are getting data from relational database into HDFS. The file system is HDFS. And export means you get data from HDFS and load into relational database. When it comes to Oracle's export import, it primarily works only with Oracle database. It does not work with other databases. With respect to Sqoop, it works with any databases, and even the target can be HDFS, it can be HBase, it can be Cassandra. It works. It is extendable. You can plug and play with any source and with any target. Okay, it need not be HDFS alone. So Sqoop is a lot more generic to compared to Oracle's or MySQL's export import, which brings few challenges which you need to keep in mind. Okay, I will get into that in a moment. Typically, in most of the places when Sqoop is covered, they cover only two commands: import and export. Okay, but I start in a different note. First, you should know, first to use Sqoop, you should validate whether you can connect to the source database and whether you have permissions to read the data from source database. Then only you should be able to run any commands. So instead of using import and export for those purposes, there are some helper commands such as eval, list databases, list tables, etc., which can be used to validate whether you have connectivity or not. Okay, so typical Sqoop command will start with Sqoop, and then you have to give one of these commands: code gen, create hive table, eval, export, help, import all tables, import mention, job, list databases, list tables, merge, metastore, and version. Okay, except for version and a few other commands, most of the commands you have to connect to the source database. Let's take the example of list databases. As it suggests, it will try to connect to the database, provided you pass correct information, and then it will actually list the databases that are available on that server on which the database software is installed. So here there is so MySQL is not installed on GW01. It is in a different node. So that node is, you also can try this: MySQL-u retail_dba is the username. So to connect to any database, what you need to have first you need to have JDBC jar file. If you want to connect using any JDBC tools, you need to have either JDBC jar file. If it is not JDBC based, then you need to have some other software installed. In this case, I'm trying to use MySQL client to connect to the MySQL server. Or if on your PC, you can use SQL Workbench or whatever IDE you want to connect to the remote database. In this case, I'm trying to connect from GW01 to the MySQL server, which is installed remotely, and for that I need to have MySQL client installed on this. So GW01 is already having the MySQL client, which is accessible to anyone. And this MySQL client, you can use MySQL command, then -u to pass the username. So retail_dba is the username, and you can pass the host name by using -h. And in this case, host name is nm01.itversity.com. So it's a remote host. And then you can say -p. And then password is itversity. And you are in the MySQL server connected as running on nm01.itversity.com, connected as the retail_dba. If you have to pass port, I think you just have to say colon 3306. So by default, MySQL runs on 3306 port, so you don't need to specify that. If it runs on different port, then you have to give the port number like this. No, let me see. I think it's -P probably. Yeah. So -P is for port. If you don't specify, if it is default, you don't need to specify. But if it is running on a different port, you have to specify the port number also. Okay. Now MySQL is a multi-tenant database, which means that you have MySQL software installed on a server, and then you can create as many databases as you want, which is different from databases like Oracle. Oracle is not a multi-tenant database. For a installation, you will have only one database, but you can have as many schemas as you want. Okay, whereas in MySQL server is the installation part, and then you create databases, and for each database you can have as many users as you want. So that's how MySQL works. Okay, and to list the databases, you have to run command show databases, and it will list the databases. And for retail_dba, it will only list the databases accessible to retail_dba. It will not list others. These are the three databases which are accessible for retail_dba. This information schema is just a data dictionary or metadata database to get the metadata about about these databases. So as developer, you don't need to worry too much about information schema. We have three databases here. Retail_db. The user retail_dba have only read-only permissions. He can query the tables. He can update. Not be able to insert, update, or delete, or even create new tables in the retail_db. Retail_export and retail_import are playgrounds. You can do whatever you want. You can create tables. You can drop tables. You can insert data. You can delete data. You can do whatever you want. And just use it as scratchpad, because we might drop those databases if there are too many databases at any point in time. Drop those tables in those databases at any point in time. So that being said, now let us say I want to connect to retail_db, and if I want to, I can use command to switch to a database, and then I can run show tables to list the tables. These are all similar to the Hive commands which we ran earlier. Hive is highly influenced with MySQL. Okay, so we have 6 tables, and to validate, we can say select star from departments. So how did we connect to this? We connected using MySQL client and passing the host name and port number along with the credentials. We connected to that server. Now for any tools such as Sqoop, we require JDBC jar files to be available, so that they can connect to the respective database. Without JDBC jar file, you will not be able to connect. So first thing you need to do is, either if you have access to those directories, you should go to that location and see if you have the JDBC jar or not, or you have to check with the system admins. Then only you should be able to run, or you can run whatever command I will be showing now, like list databases, which will confirm whether you are able to connect to the database or not. So first I will start with the command itself, list databases. I will highly recommend you to run this command, which will test your JDBC URL, your username and password, all the information required to connect to a database. And this list databases, so this / is Linux way of line breaking into multiple lines just for readability purposes. To connect, you have to use a control argument called --connect. Okay, space. You can say JDBC colon MySQL colon // This is how it will start. Okay, not this one, this one. Okay, forward slash. You have to do the forward slash and 2 forward slashes, and then mn01 dot itversity.com. If you have to give the port number, you just have to do colon. In this case, it is using default port number 3206, and then that's it. You don't need to give the database name because we are trying to list the databases. In some commands, we have to give the database name also. In this case, I'm not interested in the database name, just using connect. And then to connect to the database, what we need? We need the username. That is the control argument for username. And the username is retail_dba. And then password. itversity. Either you can give password like this, or you can say -P, which will prompt you for the password. Okay, and also you can pass the password file also. In actual production environment, you should pass it as password file. You should not use --password and hard code the password. -P, you cannot use that easily because it will prompt for the password and you have to pass the value to it to work. Best way is to use password file. So in this case, if I use a -P, it will prompt for the password. Password is itversity, and hit enter. Now you see we got the databases. Now here, if it says there are multiple things, let's say I run this same command, saying JDBC colon Oracle, and hit enter. If it gives could not load DB driver class, that means jar file is missing. Okay. The jar file which will facilitate you for the JDBC connectivity is missing. So if that error comes, you need to check with administrators, especially if it is the Hortonworks based cluster. You should look into this location, user HDP, or you can actually check with the administrators to get what is the base location for the binaries, and then you can say 2 dot the latest version. I think even current will work, and then go to Sqoop and then go to lib. You should go to this directory and run ls-ltl. Here, either you should have the soft link to the jar file to connect to the respective database, or you can have the copy of the jar file also. It's better to use soft links always and keep all your jar files in a centralized location, all the database jar files. Okay. So first you need to make sure you have the jar file here, and before that, if the jar file is in this location, then you will not get this error, whatever I have shown. Okay, so other error which you will get is, for example, I'm giving a separate a new host name which does not have the database, and if you see, another error which you might get is connection refused. If you get connection refused, there are multiple issues, and there could be multiple issues. One is either you are not giving the host name correctly or the port number correctly. Okay, and to validate, either you can use NC or telnet, one of these commands. Okay, NC will be typically available on Linux based systems. Telnet might be available or might not be available. Whether you use NC or telnet, it will take host name and port number space separated like this and hit enter. If it is working, then you will see message like this. Otherwise, it will say not found. So first you need to check this. Okay. If you are sure that this is the correct host name and this is the correct port number, still it might run into connection issues if there is a firewall blocking you. So you need to go to the system admins and confirm that firewall is not blocking you to connect to that database from a remote machine. Okay. So this is one of the common issues, connection refuse. Most likely they will get connection refused if they give typos in the host names. First, you need to be extremely careful while giving the host name, port number, and credentials of the database. You have to be very focused and you have to be extremely careful. And then sometimes you will get this error. And the lot of guys, they run the command. And when they raise the issues on discuss.itversity.com or whatever platform I am active, is they say I ran this command, it does not work. They don't even do the due diligence by going just to scroll a little bit up, see the errors and exceptions, and understand the error and exception. Okay, if you understand it, you will see. And sometimes I will go step by step. Okay, tell me where running by running telnet and all those things. So they will check the telnet. There will be typo in the host name. I will fix the host name or the port number. They will run it again, and it will give some error. Immediately they will say, "No, it's not working. I'm still getting the error." They will not even go and read whether they are getting the same error or different error. Okay. So anyway, so in this case, let us, if you give incorrect username or password. Okay. So ITversity is the password. In this case, I'm giving something else and hit enter. And if you scroll up, in case of incorrect username or password, you will get this access denied for the user. Typically, it is either incorrect username or incorrect password. And a lot of guys will make mistake at the username. They try to give the database name as username. Okay, that's where the problem will be. Okay, so these are the typical errors which you run into, and for few guys it costed the certification also. So just spend enough time and be diligent and try to focus on these issues before actually running the queries with respect to Sqoop as part of the certification. I will always start with this command, list databases, and check whether it is working or not. Okay. So even after all these things, next comes the permissions to you. Okay. You have access to databases, but you are not sure whether you will be able to read the tables or not. Okay. In that case, first thing what you need to do is you say list tables, and the list tables as part of the connect. Here we have to give the database name, and here there is another level of complexity which I will explain in a moment. So I give list tables, and we have to give the database name here. What is the database name? Database name, let's say, is retail.db. We can only give either retail.db or retail import or retail export. We cannot give anything else, or information schema. But information schema we are not interested. And hit enter. You got the list of tables. Okay. So one complexity which you need to understand is, as I have mentioned to you earlier, Sqoop is a generic tool. Okay. And if you compare, and it works with many databases. So one of the thing which you need to keep in mind is, as it work with Oracle, MySQL, Postgres, and many other databases, one thing in one database means something else in the other database. For example, Oracle is, you can, once you install Oracle software, you can only have one database for installation. Now with Oracle 12c, they are trying to change. They are trying to they are influenced from MySQL, and they're trying to make some changes to the architecture and trying to make the database multi-tenant. But traditionally, Oracle is one database per installation, whereas MySQL, once you install MySQL, you can have as many databases as you want. Okay, so when you say list databases with MySQL, it correctly lists the databases. But if you run the same command with Oracle, it will list the schemas. It will not list the databases. Okay, so you need to keep these things in mind. You just have to think that okay, we are working on a different database which we worked earlier, and the behavior might be a little bit different. So you have to spend some time to understand those differences. Because if you go to the documentation is completely based on their testing on MySQL database. They haven't tested thoroughly on Oracle at all. So you will see a lot of surprises. Okay. So if you have to get into the detail and you need to understand how it behaves with different databases. Okay. Now let's see whether we will be able to run queries against this and read the data. Okay. Because unless you have access to, for example, if you want to export the data, where the data will be inserted or updated into the target database. In that case, you could have the permissions. Instead of running import or export command to confirm, there is another command called Sqoop eval. Okay. It also takes the connect string, the username and password, and on top of that, it also takes another control argument called query. Okay, and then you can actually give any query here. Let's start from departments. Hit enter. Now you can see you are getting the data. That means you have at least the read permissions on the table, so you are good to go with the Sqoop import. Give you 5 minutes time or 10 minutes time here. Try to understand the list databases, list tables, and eval command. And there is a significance to eval command. I will explain the significance once I complete the rest of the stuff. But make sure you are able to connect to the MySQL here. If you want to connect to the Postgres, your JDBC URL will change. You need to have the jar file in user HTTP current Sqoop lib. If it is Oracle, you have to have Oracle jar file, and you need to use Oracle related the database related stuff as part of the connect string username and password. Okay, so I will give 10 minutes of time. Try to run this. If you need help, what you have to do is Sqoop help eval. It will give all the control arguments with respect to eval. Okay. Similarly, if you want to get help for which databases, you can just say list databases. Okay. So if you are not sure about any particular parameter, you can use help command. So I will give 10 minutes time here. So make sure you run some Sqoop commands around list databases, list tables, and eval, and make sure you are able to validate that you can connect to the database and run some queries. So for NoSQL, you have to check the documentation of the respective technology. You might have to add additional jar files and all those things. High level steps will be same. To answer Abhishek, Himanshu, for me it's not connecting. Maybe they have blocked it. Okay, probably. What is the error you are getting? No, it should not. Actually, once you log into gateway node, you are out of your firewall. You should be able to connect. If you can paste the command which you are trying to run, Himanshu, in the chat, I can confirm whether it is working or not. Once you are on the gateway node, it should not cause any problem to you. Okay. So here there is a typo. JDBC MySQL colon forward slash. Your JDBC URL is not correct. So it should look like this. Okay, then it will work. Let me see what error it will give. Yeah, this is for list tables or eval. You have to pass the database like this. Otherwise, you don't need to have the database. You just have to pass only till here. Okay. So before you give up in future, right? Before you give up, if you run into this issue, what you need to do is to confirm whether it is connectivity issue. See, first of all, this error is saying no manager for connect string. So it is not connection related issue. If it is connection related issue, you will get connection refused error. Okay, and before you give up on firewalls, you should run telnet command like this. It will confirm whether you have access. If you get like this, that means there is no issue with the connection. Similarly, you can also run nc command, netcat command. See here, it just struck. Okay, with nc it will just struck and it will start accepting messages. With telnet also it will struck like that. If you get something like this, if you get some if it hang when you run these things, then it means it is working. So don't just give up thinking that it's because of the connectivity issue. If it is connectivity, then it will complain whether the host is not reachable or connection refused, something like that. Okay, we'll give 3 more minutes. Okay, one more minute. Okay, now let us start talking about rest of the stuff. If you guys have any issues, let me know. I will definitely troubleshoot and fix those. Otherwise, we will start discussing about other stuff. So to get the documentation, no. In typical cluster, RDBMS will be installed elsewhere. It will be completely out of your Hadoop cluster. You should not have any of these databases sharing with your Hadoop cluster. Typically, RDBMSs are mission critical systems. They will be set up completely separately. Okay, now if you need the documentation, you can use Sqoop user guide. And in my case, I will be covering 1.4 the latest version. Probably, I think 1.4.4 is the latest version. And this is how you can go. And the version, to get the version, you can just have to say Sqoop version to understand the version on the current cluster. It is 1.4.6. So I will go for 1.4 documentation. Okay, and there is another Sqoop version called Sqoop 2, which is being developed for a few years but never got traction. No one uses Sqoop 2. I think it is a failure. Otherwise, by now it should have been playing a much bigger role. Okay, so Sqoop is primarily to get data from relational databases by connecting through JDBC and then get the data to HDFS or other way around. So to get data into HDFS from a source database, we have two variations of the same command, which is import. So Sqoop import is to import one table at a time, and Sqoop import all tables is to import all the tables from a database or from a schema. When it comes to Oracle, it's a schema. When it comes to MySQL, it is called as database. Okay, and here to get the syntax, you can click on this, and almost all the commands, the syntax is divided into common arguments, which will be common across all the commands like eval, list database, list tables, etc., which includes connecting using JDBC URL. If you want to use a custom connection manager and custom driver, you can specify those things along with connect. And Hadoop mapped home, if you want to give a custom location, you can set Hadoop mapped home. Password file or -p or password is to pass the password in different manners. Typically, we should use password file for the production type of scenarios, and then username to give the username, verbose to print more information while working, and connection param file. Connection param file will instead of passing the connection parameters in the command line, you can pass using connection param file. So this is primarily for the release management. If you want to develop in development, if you want to build application in which it will actually connect to a different database in development and different database in production. If you hard code, what will happen when you move to higher environment? You have to refactor your code. For that reason, we will have connection param file in the same location in development and production. Development will have the database details of the development environment, and production will have the database details from which data has to be read in production. So for that scenario, we can use connection param file. Connection param file and password file are extensively used in actual application implementations. For exploration purposes, you don't need to worry too much about those things, but you should know about these things if you want to work on any projects by developing data integration frameworks. Okay. And after the common arguments, There are validation arguments. Validation arguments are not that important. I also haven't explored much about those things. The most important part is import control arguments. So after common arguments, each command will have its own, each subcommand will have its own control arguments. In this case, we are talking about Sqoop import. Here you can see we have these many import control arguments, and you should know the relevance of each of these control arguments. Okay. And then import is the biggest command in Sqoop. If you know Sqoop import, you know 50% of the Sqoop, 50% or 70% of the Sqoop. And then Sqoop export is the next biggest command. If you know both, you are 90% done. Okay. Now let us understand these different commands. Before we start exploring these commands, let me try to run a simple Sqoop import command to import data from one table in the database into HDFS. So for that, first let me set the ground. Hadoop ss-ls/user d. I'm trying to see if there is a directory already. There is this retail_db directory. Okay, so I am deleting that. User d gadiraju retail_db. Okay, never ever do the Sqoop import to your home directory. Don't ever do that. It has few side effects. I will explain those things later. Okay, make sure you create, the best practice is to create a directory within your home directory or somewhere in the directory structure beyond your home directory, and then use that as your target directory. Never directly copy data or run Sqoop import pointing to your home directory directly. Okay, so the typical Sqoop import command will look like this: Sqoop import --connect JDBC MySQL and then 01.itversity.com. Always I try to use the port number so that people remember at the time of certification the relevance of the port number. Sometimes to make it a little bit complicated, as part of the documentation in the certification, they might say that, okay, database is running on this port. Then people should know that they have to use colon 3306 at whatever port they pass. That's why I typically use this as part of the training, but otherwise we don't need to pass the default values like this. And then you have to pass the database from which you want to import the table. And /retail_db. This is the database name. So after giving the host name URL using DNS, alias as well as port number, you have to give the / and the database name, and then username retail_dba, password itversity, and then table. Let me try to import orders. Okay, because we have to pass copy data to HDFS, the target location can be specified in two ways. One is using target-dir, and the other one is using warehouse dir. Okay, so if you want to give target dir, you have to give the base directory to which the data needs to be copied. If you want to give warehouse dir, can be used if you just want to create a directory with your table name and then copy into that location, then you can give warehouse directory. So target directory in this case should be user d gadiraju retail_db and then orders. Let me see if it will create this retail underscore DB then orders or it will fail. Complaining retail DB does not exist. Let us see. So now the data is copied. So even though I deleted the retail underscore DB completely, it created retail underscore DB and then orders, both the directories. You can validate by running Hadoop fs -ls user digadi raju retail underscore DB orders. So when you pass target directory, when you use target directory, what it will do, it will use the location which is passed under the target directory to copy the files. If I use warehouse directory, what will happen is, let me delete this again. And then the only difference is I am using warehouse directory here. Okay. So when you use warehouse directory, you should give the base directory in the target location. You should not give like this, which is table specific. You have to give the base directory. What will happen is, whatever table name you give here, with that table name, it will use this as base directory, and then it will create a subdirectory with the table name, and it will copy the data. Whereas with target directory, it will create the directory whatever name you have given here. So if you use table as orders, and if you say target directory user dgadraju retail underscore db slash o, what will happen? Your data will be under o. If you give warehouse directory and if you say retail db slash o, there will be a subdirectory by name orders and it will copy the data here. So if you want to copy a given table into the target location, by specifying the complete path, you have to give target directory. If you just want to give the base directory, and if Sqoop, if you let Sqoop to create the directory name with the table name which you are trying to copy, then you can use warehouse directory and hit enter.
So this is the only difference between target and warehouse.
That's it. There is no other difference. Okay, so minimum you have to give the connect, username, password, table, or there are alternatives for table. We will see later. Yeah. And then warehouse directory or target directory. That is the minimal things which you have to pass while running the Sqoop import command. Okay, now let us validate to confirm that we got the data. Okay, so now we have covered target directory and warehouse directory in this, and also table. Okay, and we will go through the other things. So if you say append, so right now we already have the data. Okay, and if I try to run import command again using the warehouse directory itself, the default behavior will be, it will complain that directory already exists and it will fail. It failed, saying that already exists. So now to address this thing, there are two options. One is append and the other one is this should be all right. Okay, not overwrite. If you want to overwrite, you just have to say delete target directory. Okay, that means it will delete the directory first and then it will try to copy. So now let us see. As of now, Hadoop fs-ls is returning 4 directories, 4 files under orders. Now if I do the same Sqoop import with append, last time it failed, saying directory already exists. Now what will happen is, you will have the same data copied once again. So you will find 8 files instead of 4. Okay, now if I do Hadoop fs-ls, there will be 8 files. Okay, and now if I say delete target directory, and if I run it again, it will delete the directory first and then it will copy. So you will end up with 4 files. Why 4 files? We will get into that now. So the reason why it generates 4 files is, there is a parameter called --num mappers. You can also use -m for that. The default of this is 4. Because you are giving 4 here, it is creating 4 files. Okay, what is happening with this when we specify 4 or when we leave it as default? To understand what is happening, you have to go to these logs. It will also give you the life cycle of your Sqoop import execution. Okay, so first thing, what it is doing is, it is trying to generate the code. What is that generating the code? When you actually try to fetch the data, okay, you should have a Java bean which will store that data before writing into HDFS. For that, what you need the column names, you need the data type of those columns, then only you will be efficiently copy the data, right? So to get the metadata, what it will do, it will run this command. Internally, it will run this command, and along with that, you can get the metadata using JDBC code. You can get the metadata of the result set. So we are trying to fetch one record, and as part of that result set, internally it will try to get the metadata, and using that metadata, it will create a Java file. Okay, and this is the location. You can override this location to different location also. And if you look at that location, in this case, I am logging into the cluster again in a separate session, and then I am copy pasting that path. What it has, after a bunch of import commands, so we are talking about orders table, right? Here you can see getters, setters, and on the column names. So first column is order ID. Okay, so this is the order ID column, attribute for the order ID column. You have getter, you have setter, and then few other methods which are important. And then we have order date, and then we have order customer ID, and we have order status in orders. So it used that metadata to build this Java file, and using this Java file, it generates a jar file. Okay, so the Sqoop execution engine will use this jar file along with the other binaries to apply the structure on the data which it retrieves. Okay, so first thing it will do is update the Sqoop engine with the appropriate jar file so that it can process the data. Once that is done, what it is doing, it is trying to start a MapReduce job. And before starting the MapReduce job, you can ignore all these things, and you should focus on this bounding vals query. What it is doing here, it is getting min and max on one column. What is this column? This is a primary key column on the table. On orders, order is the primary key column. So by default, when you do not specify any num mappers, you do this 4, and it will apply the min and max on the primary key. If you want to override this value Instead of primary key, let's say you want to use some other column to to determine the boundaries to process the data. You have a column. You have another control argument called split by. We will see that later. Anyway, now it uses the already at the field, got the min and max. This is the information here. So the min value is 1 for already and max value is 68,883. Because the num mappers is 4, it will try to split this 1 to 68,883 into 4 buckets. And how it will decide? It will subtract the minimum value with the maximum value. How much it will give? It will give 68,882. Okay, now if I say 68,000, actually it will give 68,883 divided by 4. Okay, so now you can see it is 17,220. So what will happen? 1 to 17,220 will be treated as one split. 17,221 to 34,440 it will use as second split. 34,440 1 to 51,660 it will use as third bucket, and 51,661 to 68,883 it will use the fourth bucket. So it is using this logic to identify mutually exclusive subsets which is inclusive of all the data without missing any data, and use multiple threads to process the data. So internally it will use these boundaries 1 to 17,220, 17,221 to 34,440, 34,441 to 51,660, 51,661 to 68,883 as part of the select query. So even though you are saying only once to connect, select Sqoop import connect, because you are using num mappers as 4, it will internally use 4 mappers, and each mapper will generate a different select query using different boundary conditions. And then each thread will get mutually exclusive data, and that data will be loaded into the target location. So that's how this works. It is very, very important to understand this one. Okay, now there are a few questions from Abhishek. Let me take these things. That is just default. 4 is just default. I don't know the rationale behind it. So unrecognized argument. That means your Sqoop import command is not correct. Okay. Okay. Here you have to give hyphen capital P or hyphen password. The syntax is not correct. Either you have to give hyphen capital P to pass the password, where it will prompt you for the password. If you want to give the complete password, you have to give hyphen password. That you should go to the documentation, and you can go to the common arguments, and to pass the password there is no option of hyphen P. So there is a syntax issue, Himanshu. Okay, you should focus on those errors. And then, so we have seen append, we have seen target directory, we have seen warehouse directory, we have seen table, and we have seen the relevance of num mappers. Now if you look into the data, I'm going to the data now, and then Hadoop fs, let me do fs-ls. And then let me run tail command on each of these things. Hadoop fs-tail, hit enter. You can see this thread copied data up to 17,221. Similarly, if I do 1, 34,442. So it got the data exactly matching the boundary conditions. In this case, data is like that, so you can easily identify. But in production, it will not be like that. Okay. Now, there can be multiple scenarios, in which case you might not have the primary key column. If there is no primary key column, and if you leave the number of mappers as 4, it will fail, saying that you cannot use number of mappers as 4. Either you have to reset to 1, or you have to use split by. So if you have to reset to 1 because of there is no primary key, then you just have to say -m1 or -num -mappers and 1. Otherwise, if you still want to split, even if there is no primary key, you can say split by, and you can give any field you want. But recommended is you should always give the indexed field. If you give non-indexed field, what will happen? First, it has to get this. You have to run this query. Let's say there are 1 billion records in a table, very large table. Running this query itself will take a long time. And on top of that, if the column is not indexed, what will happen? Instead of going through indexed read, it will go through full table scan. Each thread will do the full table scan. And most likely, if you are trying to import a very large table, it will break. You will not be able to import if the table is not indexed. So whenever you use split by clause, recommendation is always to use indexed column. Okay. So here I'm using the same. I'm trying to use this time a string type column, which is order status, just to show some things, and hit enter. I'm trying to split by order status, which is of type string. So it fails. The reason is, by default, the split by expects split by or even the primary key column, it expects to be numeric value. If it is of type string, then you have to override this parameter. Only then your split by will work. Okay. If it is numeric, it will work without any issues. But if it is not numeric, then you have to pass this. Just to produce this error, I actually use the split by order status, and then we just have to paste in the give complete syntax and hit enter. Now it will work. Okay, I think I have to give in the beginning. I think I have to give here. After import, first thing is I have to pass those arguments with -D. Okay, so there are some questions from. Okay, so that I'm not sure why it is reporting as twice. I don't know. You can actually raise a Jira ticket to them. It gives traction to you. If they accept it as a bug, it gives some traction to your profile. Okay, so now you see data is copied, and the order status is having only 9 fields. Now if I do Hadoop ss-ls, now all the 4 files will be of significantly different size here. Actually, it generated 5 files. I don't know why it has generated 5 files. It should have generated 4 only, but I'm not sure why it has generated 5. Okay, and also you can see that data is highly skewed. Don't worry about this. I just want to produce that issue about splitting by non-numeric column. You have to use that control argument, which is reported as part of the exception. Okay, so that being said, if you go to this, we have covered append, we have covered split by, we have covered table, we have covered target directory, we have covered warehouse directory, and also we have covered num mappers. Okay, So using this, I will give you 15 minutes time. Okay, don't use split by. Just I will give you one of the commands which worked for me. Okay, first thing what you have to do is you have to create a working directory for you. You can remove this delete target directory because you are running for the first time. It's up to you whether you want to use target directory or warehouse directory. Okay, but remember that when you use warehouse directory, you have to give the base directory. When you give target directory, you have to give the directory up to the table. Okay, and don't give the same table name for same directory for multiple tables when you give the target directory. It will you will run into several issues. Okay, either use warehouse directory and give up to the base directory, or use target directory and give up to the table. Okay, so I'm pasting this as part of the chart. What I want you to do is you should import all the 6 tables. So first you go to the MySQL and identify what those 6 tables are, or you can actually do list tables. Already I told you earlier to run list tables, list database, etc. So use this command, list the tables, and then run the Sqoop import for each of these tables, and make sure all the tables are copied to the base directory, to the working directory which you have created. Okay, so I will give 15 minutes time. So run these commands, and if you run into any issues, let me know. I will help you. Don't worry, even if the questions are very naive, I will respond. Don't worry too much about it.
Don't use P value.
Yeah. And also when you use this Sqoop import command, don't try to give my directory. Try to use your directory. To get the table names, just use this list tables. So someone in YouTube is asking what is MC? MC is netcat. It's a command to validate and also to send messages to the web service. So these are the commands which are run, list tables, and then Sqoop import. If anyone want it for your reference. And make sure you are comfortable with the documentation. Either you can go to Sqoop user guide, and also you can just say Sqoop help import. We'll get the details about all the commands here also. First, it will start with common arguments, then import control arguments. And we are talking about import control arguments now. Yes, Himanshu, you can give 2, you can give 4, you can give 8, you can give whatever value you want. Uh, in actual production scenario, you should do a lot more due diligence, and I will cover those things later about what are the side effects and what should be the value you should use. But for exploratory purposes, you can give any number. So 8 more minutes. I think we start at 3:40. Okay, for split by order status, it's using 5 splits. Yeah, I don't know why it is using 5 by default. It should not use 5. I'm also not sure. But it is generating only 4 files. It did not generate 5 files. Means one file is of size 0. Yeah, you are saying split by department ID and the target directory orders, table is orders. So orders does not have department ID. So you just do if you are interested, there should be a way to get the table structure also. What you can do is you can do eval, okay, and then run the query with limit. Don't run eval without limit, especially for big tables. You can give limit 10 or something. You will get the column names and also some data. So as you are trying to run against orders, you run eval on orders and get the column names. So only these are the columns we have.
And that you can describe orders.
Hmm?
In SQL, you describe orders.
Okay, we can use describe orders also. That's good. So what Venkat, right? Vijay. What Vijay is saying is you can also say describe orders if you just want to get the column names and the data types. Okay, so everyone done? I will give more time if you guys are not done. Okay, then let us proceed. Okay, now next set of parameters is the file format. So out of the box, Sqoop supports 4 file formats: arrow, data file, sequence file, text file, and Parquet file. Okay. If your cluster is running a little bit older version, Parquet file might not be available. Okay, that's why it is very important to look into the documentation for that version. Okay, so by default, everything will be text file. Hence, we'll be able to read the data the way I have run the tail command right earlier. Okay. Still have tail, so it is only getting all the commands. So if I run tail on the table which we copied uh, on the directory to which we copied the data, if you hit enter, because it is partitioned by order status, the first file does not get the data. Anyway, now you can see that it's all plain text data. Okay, if you want to change the format, let's say if you want to create a sequence file. Okay, when you do the import, you just have to say as sequence file. And when it generates the sequence file, when you try to use sequence file, it will generate metadata files also, sequence file or arrow file or parquet file. And you have to use these files to deserialize the data for other purposes later. Sometimes what will happen, you will do the Sqoop import using sequence file into a directory, and after that you want to process using MapReduce or Spark, whatever it is. And to understand the structure, you need to have access to the metadata. And I think the metadata file will be created here itself. This is the one, orders.java, because I try to copy orders, right? So this will have the necessary code to use it as sequence file. Okay. Similarly, if you want to do arrow file, you can use the as arrow file like this. As arrow, I think. Not as arrow file. Let me see. As arrow data file. And now data will be copied in arrow format. And when you run arrow format, when you say as arrow data file, it will actually give you AVSC file, which will have the metadata. And you should use that AVSC file for other purposes. With respect to text file, you will have the delimiter for both field as well as row. But for other file formats like sequence file, arrow file, parquet file, you need to capture the metadata. Sqoop itself will take care of it for you. It will generate this AVSC file in the same location where you are trying to run the command. You can see it here. And then you can actually say orders.avsc to get the metadata of your data. And you can use this for processing the data later. Similarly, is the case with parquet file. So if they ask you to use a particular file format, you just have to choose one of these things and use it as part of your Sqoop command. And then boundary query. Okay, the relevance of boundary query. In this case, we are using orders from 1 to 68,883, right? Now let us say, typically in most of the applications, right, the primary keys are typically the fields which we'll use for splitting will be like a social security number or ID within the database, something like that. And typically those will be fixed length. They will not start with 1. If you get into the bank database, your account ID will not start with 1. It will be of fixed length. It will be 10 digits or 12 digits, whatever it is. Okay, and even with 10 digits and 12 digits, it will not start with, let's say if it is 12 digits, it will not start with 1 and 11 zeros. It will start with some 5 series or 6 series or something. There will be some logic behind the numbers also. Okay, but you might have heard about smoke testing. A lot of experienced people know smoke testing. What is smoke testing? When something is deployed into production, as part of validation process, after deploying it in production, the UAT team or the testing team will use some fake accounts and test the functionality of the entire application from end to end. Okay, so what will happen? They use some outliers, such as, let's say we are trying to use ID of 6 digits. So what they will do, they will use some number like all 6 ones, all 6 eights, or 6 nines, something like that. Okay, but our range, let's say we want to start with 3 series. So typically, let's say it starts with 3 series with 6 digit. Okay, and over a period of time, let's say we have let's use 7 numbers. For a period of time, let's say we start with 3 million and it went up to 5 million. Okay, and then you have outliers which are created for testing purposes, such as 7 ones, 7 eights, 7 nines. Now what will happen when the boundary query run? This is the minimum value, this is the maximum value. Okay, and if this is the minimum and this is the maximum, the difference will be 7 eighths. And if you try to divide by 4, let's say you use number of mappers as 4 only, it will give 7 twos, right? So what will happen? 7 ones to 7 threes will go to one thread. 7 threes to 7 fives will go to another thread. 7 fives to 7 sevens will go to another thread. 7 7 to 7 nines will go to another thread, right? So what will happen? Only 2 threads will process, or 1 or 2 threads will process the most of the data. Other 2 threads, even though you are saying number of mappers as 4, because of the outliers, it will not do a lot of work. Okay, one is your import time will take longer time, and also downstream also, as the data is not evenly distributed, it will run into many other issues. This is called as skew. Okay, to address the skew, you can use the boundary query. So in this case, as your numbers start with 3 and 7 zeros and end with 5 and 7 zeros, you can specify this as boundary query. Instead of using select min of primary key column and max of primary key column, from the table name, it will now start using these values which are passed as part of the boundary, whatever the boundary query returns. It will use those values to use the splits. Okay, so that is the relevance of the boundary query. It is primarily to address the skew. Now let us import the orders table. Okay, and then I will be copying it as text file itself. So the syntax will be like this: boundary query, and let's say our valid numbers are from select 1 2 3 4 5 6 5 ones, and then 68,883 from I think you just can give like this. Okay, and also you can say min of order ID, max of order ID from orders, where if you want to just give the range, you can say order ID between 1 2 3 4 5 and then let's say and 70,000. You can do like this also. You can give any query, but the query should return 2 values. It could be hard-coded values like this, or a valid query which will give 2 values. If it is Oracle, this query will not work. You have to say select 5 ones, 60,083 from dual. Okay, now you see the splits are determined by these values. And if you go to the boundary query, there is no boundary. Yeah, there is a No, there is no boundary query here. Okay, because we hard coded it. Now we copied only 57,772 records. It is primarily to address the skew. Okay, and also sometimes, right, one more advantage is when you hard code the values like what we have done, it need not execute the query, get the min and max. If it is a 1 billion record table, if you know the min and max, you can directly hard code the values and it will be much faster. Okay, and now the columns. What is columns? Let's say I just want to fetch few columns from the table, not all the columns. Then I can say hyphen columns and give the column names comma separated. You should not have space or anything between the columns. You just have to delimit by comma. If you have space, then it will break. Okay, and direct is primarily to use direct connector. If exists for the database, it works uh, with direct connectors with respect to MySQL and Postgres, but with Oracle and all, it will not have any effect. Fetch size, this is primarily to read number of entries in each iteration. So even though you say select, means when we run default, based on the split size, it get 1 to 17,000 something for the first thread, and then second thread gets 17,000 something to 34,000 something, blah, 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 right? If you want to, within those results also, if you want to paginate internally to fetch controllable number of records, you can specify fetch size. Inline lob limit. So you should know, if you know about lob means large object. So if you know the structure of large object in RDBMS, up to particular size, the lob will be stored inline to the record. Beyond particular size, what will happen? If you have a 100 or 1 GB file, if you are trying to store in the database, and if the column is defined as lob, that 100 GB file will be copied elsewhere, and your record will have only the pointer to that. Okay. Now, when you try to use Sqoop import, if you cannot fetch everything, it will not work. But in some cases, if you want to get up to the maximum size of say an inline lob, you can set this value. Okay, and then number of mappers I have already explained. Now comes query, very important. It's an alternative to table. Either you use query or the table. You don't use both. Okay, so what the query will do is, whatever query you pass, the results will be imported. The query will be executed on the database and the results will be imported. So if you use the default number of mappers when you try to use query, it doesn't know from the query what is the primary key. So it will complain. You have to specify the field on which you want to split by. Either you have to split by or you have to reset to number of mapper as 1. Okay, and you cannot club table and query. Either you have to use table or query. So typically when you want to join multiple tables, and if you want to get the join data, or if you want to aggregate on the source database itself and only copy the aggregated data to the target database, you can use query. Very powerful. Okay, and split by already covered, and auto reset to 1 mapper. So in case if you don't have primary key on the table, if you want to use only 1 mapper without failing, you can use auto reset to 1 mapper. All these things will come handy while you start developing the developing the data integration application. Okay, as part of that, instead of capturing the exception and then changing the number of mappers or apply the split by, if you just want to set the mapper to 1, in case if there is no primary key column on the table, you just specify auto reset to 1 mapper. It will automatically run for you. Okay, and then where clause will be typically used with the table. If you want to filter data and only copy the data based on certain condition, you can use where clause as part of your query. So the difference between columns and where clause is for horizontal filtering means if you want to filter out the rows, you have to use where clause. For the vertical filtering means if you want to just fetch the columns you want, you can use columns. So either you can use columns, table, and where clause in certain scenarios, or you can directly use query and select whatever columns you want and apply the where condition. Both will work similar manner. Okay, and then if you want to compress, you have to enable the compression by saying -z or -- compress. And if you want to specify the compression codec, you have to specify, otherwise it will use gzip. And to get the compression codec, you have to go to coresite.xml and get the valid compression algorithms on the cluster, and you have to use whatever algorithm you want to use. Okay. And then we have null string and null non-string. If you want to represent null in a particular manner, when it copied to HDFS, you can use these parameters called null string and null non-string. Null string is for representing the string nulls, and null non-string is to represent the non-string nulls, which is numeric for the numeric columns. Okay, these are the things which you need to understand. Okay, one thing which you need to keep in mind is query. Let me try out or give an example with query. Okay, so don't try to use query with where condition and columns. It does not work. Either use query, or for simple transformations you can specify columns, table, and where. Then it will be evaluated into select the columns and from table where this where condition. Okay, so now let me try to use query. In this case, I will try to import the entire table orders with query. Instead of saying table like this, I'm saying query select star from orders. So this will not work. It will throw multiple exceptions, but I will explain how to work around those exceptions. And if I hit enter, it says, okay, first thing is we have to specify the destination directory because this is not the table name. Okay, destination with target directory. So it does not know what should be the directory name beyond this to load this data into. Okay, that's why it failed, saying that specify destination is target directory. So we have to first make the first change which you need to make is, instead of using warehouse directory, I have to use target directory. And then I have to give the complete directory name. Now it is complaining about split by because it does not know what is the primary key column from that query, right? So here either you can use num mappers as one, or you can say split by. If you have a different so as part of this query you can give anything. It need not be just star. You can have aggregations and all those things, right? So if you want to split by a derived column, you have to give the alias to that as part of the query, and you can use that as part of the split by. Okay, in this case I'm just using order ID and hit enter. So now it is complaining with something else called $conditions. Okay, so we have to add this to this query. I will explain why we have to do this. Probably freshers might not understand, but experienced folks will understand. And because it expects $conditions, we have to escape it. Otherwise, dollar conditions will be evaluated, conditions will be treated as a Linux variable in this case, because we are running on the Linux kernel, Linux shell. To escape the dollar, we have to give the backslash dollar conditions and hit enter. Now it is complaining on some other error. What is eval? No. We are talking about Sqoop import. Eval is different. Here we are trying to copy the data. To copy the data, you should always use import. The control argument query is available for multiple commands. You should not mix up eval with the import. Here our requirement is simple. We want to get the data, we have to use import. And import also have the option to query. What is that he's saying? Yeah, good catch, Abhishek. Thank you. Here I have to say where and hit enter. Okay. Now if you see the why this dollar conditions, there are multiple reasons why it is asking us to use dollar conditions. So here to get you need to get the metadata first. For that you have to run query on these orders. If they run this entire query, then you will unnecessarily get the data. There is no need to get the data to get the structure. So they have specified where 1 equal to 0. So to replace this with dollar conditions, as part of the query, we have to pass this where dollar conditions. And also while fetching the data, we have to change it to where 1 equal to 1. If we just use dollar condition, it doesn't mean anything in the database. It has to be true condition so that it can run something on top of it. Okay. So if you look at the bounding values query, the same conditions is replaced with 1 equal to 1. So to give flexibility to them to generate the necessary query, to get the metadata, to get min and max values, and also to get the actual data itself, we have to specify dollar conditions. Without that dollar conditions, it will not work. You have to say where dollar conditions, and dollar has to be escaped. Otherwise, it will be like select star from orders where if you don't escape. Okay. At the same time, earlier I just did not specify where, so it got resolved into select star from orders 1 equal to 0, which means nothing. Incorrect queries. That's why it has thrown the syntax related issues. If you try to use boundary query and all those things on top of it, it will not have much. I think it will not fail, but at the same time, it does not act as expected. Okay, so you can have any query here. So that is about query. Very, very important thing. You should spend some time on it. Okay, that being said, now we will get to the next list of commands. Very, very important. I will cover incremental load towards the end. We have already seen the file formats I have explained. And then you have to focus on this output line formatting arguments. There are 6 arguments. Okay. By default, fields are terminated by comma when it comes to Sqoop import. Can you recollect what is the default field delimiter in Hive? Control A, ASCII null value, which is /u0001. Okay. Whereas in Sqoop, it's comma. So if you run Sqoop with default delimiters, and if you create Hive tables with default delimiter using create actional table, Then when you try to query the data in Hive, it will throw errors. Okay, so you have to watch on those integration points between different technologies. You have to be extremely careful when you are trying to use multiple technologies. You need to understand the default values and make sure both can work together. Very, very important thing to keep in mind. Okay, now if you want to override the fields terminated by, you can say hyphen hyphen fields terminated by, and you can specify whatever delimiter you want to use. Similarly, if you want to change the lines terminated by, these are applicable only with text file format. With other formats, these are not. These will not add much value. Lines terminated by is for your new line. By default, the each line is considered to be record. If you want to change the delimiter for the record delimiter, you can use lines terminated by. And then sometimes if the comma is the delimiter, if you take the example of address, company name, etc., the value within the address, company name might have comma. Okay. In that case, you have to enclose that field. So for that purpose, you can use enclosed by double quote, sets a required field enclosing character. If you want, you can specify it to double quote, or you can use whatever you want. By default, it's single quote. Escaped by, if you have any special characters within your data, if you want to escape those things, you can specify the escaped by. By default, it's backslash. And if you just use MySQL delimiters, whatever MySQL delimiters are, it will use those things for all four: enclosed by, escaped by, fields terminated by, lines terminated by. And also it will actually use optionally enclosed by also. Optionally enclosed by is, so enclosed by, it will actually enclose each and every column with the enclosing character. Optionally enclosed by will only enclose those things which are required. For example, if you take the address, if you say enclosed by, all addresses will be enclosed within double quotes. But if you just want to enclose, if there is a delimiting character within the value of certain records, if you want to enclose only those things, we have to use optionally enclosed by. Okay, so this is about output line formatting arguments. And the next comes Hive control arguments. Okay, so these are the Hive control arguments. We will see tomorrow. For now, I will give time to you. With respect to Cloudera, Avro file format is important. So I will try to cover Avro also, which even though it is not significant with respect to certification, still you should know how to deal with those special formats. For this purpose, what I will recommend you is create another working directory and import all the tables using Avro format. Okay, instead of using text file, you should use Avro format. And then we'll wrap up. I will give you 6 minutes time. You should be able to pick up the old queries. If you want to know how to pick up those things in Linux, you just type history and hit enter. You will get all your commands, and you can copy the one which you want. Just at the end, add hyphen hyphen as Avro data file, as hyphen Avro data file, and copy all the data in the Avro format. Okay, and then tomorrow we'll start with Hive import, and also we'll try to wrap up import all tables, and we will start with export also tomorrow. Hive is very important, so I don't want to stop in the middle. We will continue tomorrow on Hive. And don't try to use output line formatting arguments unless your file format is text file. It is not required for others. So at least you should have run for one table. If you run Hadoop fs-get, you can get the data to local file system also. In this case, I have ran this in my home directory on local file system, and then I have changed it to orders. Okay, and you can see the Avro files here. And here I have something called Avro tools, which is set up on the lab, and you can see the commands here. Several commands. Okay, Avro is nothing but kind of binary JSON format. It's not exactly BSON. There is something called BSON, which is famous in Mongo, where the data will be stored in BSON. Avro is similar to that. I'm not very familiar with the Avro internals, but it's similar to binary JSON format. So if you try to read the Avro files directly, you will see a lot of special characters. Okay, you see, it's all binary format. So if you want to convert it into readable format, you can use Avro tools. You can run get schema to get the schema from the data. So if you run Avro -tools, get schema is the sub command, and you can do the Avro file name like this, and it will give you the schema name. Okay, even if you could not identify the AVSC file, you can use Avro tools get schema and get the schema, and you can use it for processing with any other tool. And because it is JSON, for each and every record, you will have both column name and value. Okay, and if you want to read it as JSON, there is a command called toJSON. So you can say Avro -tools toJSON and then part.avro. You will get the data. So each line will be one JSON record, and you will get data like this. If you want to save it to a different file, you just have to redirect into some file with where you can give name like this. And then data will be copied to the JSON file. Now you can view. Sorry. Okay. So like that, you can run Avro tools and see plenty of other options which it provides. Once you change it to JSON, you can also change it to CSV files and all those things. There are many functions which it actually provides. Not CSV, but you can actually convert Avro to text. But converting Avro to text is not that straightforward. If you run to text, it will not work. Okay, but from text will work. If you have the text file, you can actually convert the text into JSON. That will work. Convert it into Avro. Okay, so you can explore this also. This might come handy if you have to deal with Avro. As part of the old syllabus of CCA, Avro tools, they used to give at least one question in Avro. But even with the new format, they might have some indirect reference to Avro. So having knowledge about Avro might help. Okay, so that being said, we'll continue tomorrow. We'll start with Hive related import. Make sure you understand each of these control arguments. Okay, to get good handle over Sqoop, practice well, because Sqoop has very good weightage and it's very easy to go with the Sqoop commands compared to Spark jobs and all those things. At least there will be 3 questions as part of the certification. Okay, sometimes they give even 4. It has very good weightage, so make sure you are very comfortable with Sqoop. Try to understand all the control arguments with respect to import and export. Other commands will come handy to troubleshoot the issues and all. Okay, So that being said, thank you very much, and we'll catch up tomorrow. And those who are on YouTube Live, thank you very much for joining the session. We will continue tomorrow, but before we wrap up, if you like this video, please click on the like button. If you want to provide the feedback once the video is streamed, you can use comments section of the video. If you want to share with your friends, you can click on share, and you can share on the social networking platforms. And if you need environment to practice, you just go to labs.itversity.com. We have 3 different plans for regular users: $14.95 for 31 days, $34.95 for 93 days, and $54.95 for 185 days. You can sign up with one of these plans, and if you have any questions, you are feel free to ask those questions on discuss.itversity.com, and we'll try to provide 24/7 support. Okay. That being said, thank you very much. Bye.